Okay, this book, Alternative Realities, Love in the Lives of Muslim Women, um, is a memoir. It's also a travelogue, and it's about the three lands that I belong to and my journeys to those three lands. So I was born in Bangladesh, so it's about going back to my land of birth, and I spent some years in Pakistan. It's about my journeys through Pakistan also, and India, where I've lived for almost 20 years now. So, what was the larger purpose of writing a book like this? Well, broadly speaking, there were perhaps four purposes, which were operating at some unconscious level when I started thinking about the book. One was that I wanted to find out who I am. You know, it was more like a quest for self-knowledge. And where do I belong? And the other big question or issue was the portrayal of the typical Muslim woman in the media. I was a bit tired of seeing the Muslim woman as the veiled, oppressed, person who has no voice of her own or no presence. And I thought, well, why don't I just go out and talk to just very ordinary, average Muslim women in the three lands that I belong to, and try to answer that question: who is a typical Muslim woman? And of course, the answer that I came up with, but there is no typical Muslim woman, just as there is no typical woman or man. The other larger purpose of writing this book was I wanted to talk about love, and I wanted to discover how other women see different dimensions, different aspects of love. What is falling in love for them about? How do they negotiate the restrictions that are placed on their freedoms to love who they want to, how they want to, and how do they negotiate their way in the limitations of through the limitations of their cultures. So those were the sort of larger ideas, and it was amazing. I traveled for 3 years off and on, and then I would come back home, try to write a couple of chapters, then set out on a journey again. And the book just came out, and just recently, a few days back, I picked up a very mainstream newspaper, and on the very front page there is the news that some Deobandi Maulvi has issued a fatwa saying that photography is un-Islamic, and therefore Muslims should not do photography. And the first question in my mind was, why is this front page news? You know, why does this something stupid that some Maulvi says and issues a fatwa, which I don't think any Muslims are seriously going to follow? Why does it become front page news, and for whom does it have importance? The media, obviously, because have Muslims stopped photographing themselves, or have they stopped acting or singing or dancing? And a couple of days later, I find in the same newspaper another such news item, which says that a Kashmiri singer is making headline news in Pakistan for being a pop singer. Well, so what is so sensational about it? I would like to, I have a couplet that's going through my mind, which is by Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who's a very well-known Urdu poet of the subcontinent. And this sher or couplet is, हुई है हज़रत नासे से गुफ्तगू जिस शब, हुई है हज़रत नासे से गुफ्तगू जिस शब, वो शब ज़रूर सरे कुए यार गुज़री है. And to translate it loosely would mean whenever I have met the preacher, or say the Maulvi, whenever I have met the preacher and the preacher has preached to me about reforming my ways, I have made sure that I spend that night with my beloved. And you know, the more amazing thing is that this ghazal was sung by a Muslim woman, and Noor Jahan, And it's one of the most loved ghazals of Urdu ghazals of the subcontinent to this day. It was sung sometime in the 1960s. So to come back to, and nobody got after Noor Jahan's life for saying something as radical as, whenever I meet the preacher and he preaches to me about reforming my ways, I make sure that I spend that night with my beloved. So to come back to the question of love and the lives of Muslim women, I think that their struggles are the same as the struggles of women in the subcontinent, whether they happen to be in India or Pakistan or Bangladesh. And I think ultimately what I feel is that if anything is going to save us, if anything is going to save this planet of ours, it is love. I firmly believe that. Love in all its different aspects and dimensions. Right. I think alternative realities is pointing to that image of the Muslim woman as someone who never practices, has no decision-making power, is not going to take any risks for love, or does not have mobility or freedom. And what I discovered through my travels is that Muslim women are negotiating their freedoms within the limitations of their cultures, just as all other women are. So there is this alternative picture which I'm trying to present through the stories about the women that I met. And my own story also is interwoven with the stories of the women. No, it is also the story of my life, because the very first chapter is about my life, my struggles as a Muslim woman. And the other chapters are the ongoing story of my life. So yes, that's why I call it a memoir also, because it is of dipping into the stories, the painful aspects, and the other aspects which have led to my own self-development as a writer, as a Sufi wanderer. I do consider myself a Sufi wanderer. I wouldn't say a Sufi because I don't think I've reached that state of inner spiritual development. There are at least 10 characters whose stories I narrate in the book. But there were many more people who shared their lives with me. It was just not possible. I mean, already it's like a 400-page book, and I think it's a big book. But yeah, there were just many stories that haven't actually gone into this book, but I think they're waiting for another book. Okay. I think for me, the criteria were that the person with whom I stayed, because I went and lived with the characters in their homes, in their villages, in their cities. How willing were they to open up to me? How willing were they to talk about love in their lives and what role love has to play in their lives? And because after a while I decided that that's what the book was going to be about. It was going to be about Muslim women, but it was also going to be about love and also aspects of their sexuality, how they negotiate that. So to the extent that they were willing to share those aspects of their lives with me, I think that became the criterion, and how closely I came to know them through my interactions with them. I changed their names when they weren't comfortable with keeping their original names, but some of them actually requested that they wanted their names to stay and they didn't want their names to be changed, so those names have stayed as they are. Yes, and that is precisely the point I'm trying to make, that it isn't like Muslim women don't fall in love, or they're always, they don't take radical steps in their lives, or they don't take risks for love, because what seems to be the image is that she is just a voiceless, faceless entity, not even, denied personhood, so, and she doesn't make any choices of her own. So, and falling in love and pursuing your love is all about making choices, sometimes very mad choices, risk taking. So that's precisely the point I wanted to make in the book, through the book. Yes, but I didn't actually meet the women, and there are women who have also been in love with women. So same-sex love is also very much part of this book, as is a transgendered. I mean, there is a story about a transgendered woman also, about her love. And there, you were talking about love that gets reciprocated when you think about the man in the picture. Some of the stories are about women whose love did not get reciprocated. So those are also stories in there, right? And there are some women who have fallen in love multiple times. So I wasn't able to meet the objects of their love, but yeah, they narrated the stories, and those stories, to the extent that the men or the women that the women were in love with, do come into the book. The book helped to the extent that I really define myself as a South Asian, and I want to transcend even that identity. I want to say that my address is planet Earth, the Milky Way galaxy, and the universe. So I'm hoping that we all come to that sort of identity where we really look upon ourselves as citizens of a very beautiful but very fragile planet. Really, the lines that are drawn on paper and saying this is this country and that country, and now we are enemies and so on. I'm hoping that more and more people move beyond those kinds of identities. We have multiple identities. I mean, I'm a woman. I'm a Muslim. I'm a Sufi. I'm a writer. I'm a Buddhist also. I'm a feminist. So what are my identities? I have multiple identities. But do I have to get stuck in some sort of a nationalistic identity also? And I don't think so. The Sufis believe that the one redeeming aspect of the human spirit is love. And Rumi, who is the poet par excellence of love, says that it is love and beauty that is going to save us, and all the Sufi writers, poets, and many of the Sufis have been poets, because poetry becomes this mode of expression of love, and even classical poets of the 18th and 19th century who have not necessarily been Sufis, but you see this mystical element in their poetry. So I was drawn to, I was never a religious person. I wasn't even consciously spiritual, say about 6 or 7 years ago. But then when I started reading and delving into the literature of the subcontinent, specifically Urdu and Sufi, the Sufi aspect just keeps propping up. I mean, starting with Amir Khusro, the 13th century Sufi master of music and poetry, and then through when I started traveling for this book, I kept coming upon like Sufi shrines in small out of the way places in rural Pakistan, for instance, where in Sindh, for instance, Shah Abdul Latif Bhattai, great love poet, mystical verses, and it seemed to me that their poetry holds the key to what could become a movement for peace on the planet, because they really do not distinguish between creeds and ethnicity or races. We are all part of this one race, which is the human race. And they're very inclusive. They accept, for instance, people from all backgrounds. You go to Nizamuddin's shrine in Delhi, and there are Hindus and Muslims, and everybody is welcome, and that for me is very heartening, and